right? As big of a fan as I am, send him somewhere where you're going to use him.
Agreed. He's so dynamic.
Yeah, it's such a shame. Although running out of bounds twice at the end of that game last week was pretty boneheaded, but I still love the guy. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show, Showdown Edition, presented by Jock Market. I'm Dave Loughran on the Twitters at Laffy_D, joined by Matt Gajeski at Matt_Gajeski, talking our way through a insane Thursday night football game for a number of reasons. Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Tampa Bay Bucks. Matt, this game has all of the makings and all of the ingredients to be, should I say, just an absolute shit show.
I mean, a lot of these Thursday games are, I'm hoping it's going to be competitive. I'm happy that the spread is within a touchdown. I see Tampa Bay -6.5. I think that's largely because of Philly's home field advantage. But I mean, we still have a total at 52.5, but maybe with the shit show comment, you're referring to some of the uncertainties we have in the game. And there are a couple of them.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying shit show in the sense that it's going to be, guaranteed blowout. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying in the sense that there's a lot of, as you mentioned, uncertainty. And not only that, Tom Brady's expected to play, but he's also got that thumb injury, right? So what if he comes into this game playing and he's not at 100%? I mean, he's not on the injury report or anything like that. So understandable, but I don't know. When you're dealing with a thumb injury on your throwing hand, he's going to play through it, but we'll see how he does. I'm assuming we just have to project him as if nothing's wrong, but Rob Gronkowski's out. Levante David's out. Antoine Winfield's out. Dallas Goedert is probably going to be out. And then Lane Johnson is also out for a very strange and concealed, secretive, really personal matter at this point. So there's a lot of big names that won't be on the field tonight.
Yeah, I think some of the injuries are going to be important. Of course, like Lane Johnson's a huge piece of the offensive line. Luckily, they are getting some pieces back from injury there. So hopefully it's not as drastic as maybe it's even been at times this year. But on Tampa Bay, even with some of the injuries they had last week, we just saw them hum right along. Didn't miss Rob Gronkowski whatsoever. And they have such an abundance of pass catching options. Even at the tight end position, guys they didn't necessarily need to use in OJ Howard and Cameron Brate. They're just so deep across the board. On defense, perhaps these injuries start to add up a little bit. I know they're very banged up in the secondary with Winfield, and they had Bunting go out earlier this year. So perhaps that opens up things a little bit, but we're still talking about an incredible front seven.
Yeah, I mean, this could get dangerous. Mailata is going to be on the right side. Dillard, because you have no Sayamalu, no Brandon Brooks. They're gone for the season. That could be an issue. But Philly's offensive line, credit them where it's due. They have held up despite these injuries, Matt. It should be a lot worse than it's been. So we'll see how it plays out. But really, the game has a 52.5 point implied or a total, which is nice. 6.5, depending on where you're looking, 7-point spread. The Eagles still have a decent enough implied total to where we can be looking at both of these teams and feel pretty good about it. And the craziest part to me, Matt, is, I shouldn't say craziest part, but the thing that stands out to me the most is I don't know if we've seen a more pass funnel defense in football in a while. And when you think about this team, the Tampa Bay Bucks are allowing 2.9 yards per attempt. They've allowed virtually no yards on the ground, 79 total rushing attempts. That's 15.8 per game. But then if you look at their pass coverage, they have been carved up. Now, in terms of yards per attempt and quarterback rating and all that stuff, it's not through the roof. It's not Lions level bad, but just the overall volume. Opposing passers are averaging 44 passing attempts per game against the Tampa Bay Bucks. So they're allowing the most passing attempts by a mile, and by a mile, they're allowing the fewest rushing attempts. We know pretty much what we're going to get in terms of a game plan from Nick Sirianni, unless he just confuses all of us and goes completely off the reservation.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons for opponents approaching Tampa Bay the way they do. One is they're all losing, so they have to play from behind and they're pass heavy just by nature. but we can't discount the strength of the Tampa Bay front seven on defense. They've been phenomenal. And it's not just this year. You can go back year over year. And I mean, I don't think they were this elite last year, but they were still a really strong unit, a pass funnel defense overall. So I think it's just a lot of what we saw last year. And I mean, this is a team that returned to every single starter. So I think it was kind of the expectation coming in, and it's been exactly what we've seen. But I agree with you. I think Sirianni does try to approach this through the air.
Anthony Marcus says Lafayette always shitting on his Eagles. I'm not even like, I try and stay 100% objective in these games. They are touchdown dogs at home. They are a far inferior team. I don't think there's any disputing that at this point, especially given the injuries to the line. But really all we care about is finding out where the fantasy points are going to come from. So usually I go road team first. I think I messed it up on the sidebar. So let's go with the Eagles first, Matt. Dive straight into this. But before we do, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Subscribe to the channel. What are we at? 61,500. It's a beautiful thing. And if you want to join the channel, hit that join down below. Get the custom emojis, the sweet badges that you see next to a lot of the names that are going to be popping up in chat. But more than anything, thumbs up only takes a second. If you enjoy this type of stuff, we appreciate you supporting us in that way, because it takes us a long way. It does a lot more than you could imagine when it comes to the overlords here and the YouTube algorithm. All right, Matt, Philadelphia Eagles at home, Lincoln Financial Field, 7-point dogs. We got to start with Jalen Hurts, because despite how bad he has looked in certain games, the man continues to produce points. And I saw a tweet the other day. He's the only player in the league now to finish top 12 at his position in all 5 weeks. He has 21 plus DK points in all 5 weeks. And he's been wildly inefficient in a couple of these games, at least early on, and still manages to pull it out.
Yeah, a lot of it on like touchdown volume. Last week, I think, was probably his worst performance, but he punches into 2 rushing scores. Yeah. I mean, he only had 30 rushing yards on the day, so those 2 rushing scores absolutely saved him. But that's the thing with Jalen Hurts and why he's such a safe option. He has so many ways to pay off his salary on any given day. They have been an extremely pass-heavy team, especially of late. He's over 35 attempts in 4 of the 5 games this year. Now they're a 2-3 team. They've had just to naturally pass a lot overall, and we've seen they've abandoned the run in some spots. But that's a ton of volume through the air. And if they're down, you know it's going to be there, whether it's efficient or not. It gives him a pretty decent floor. And then the rushing. He's had at least 30 yards in every game. He's above 45 in 3 of the 5. And then he's always live to punch in touchdowns on the ground. So there's so many paths to him paying off his salary, at least in a safe way. He's really hard to avoid.
It's very difficult to avoid him. Now, if you're looking just at prices, and we'll talk strategy, kind of game theory here, and not just breaking down each player, because that doesn't, help you as much as it does when we start really digging into what works, what makes the most sense, what's going to be duped the most, and all of that, which is why we'll build a lineup later in the show for a large field tournament. And then you get the deeper dive live before lock tonight for this very game. But Jalen Hurts is the second highest priced player behind Tom Brady. Does it make, as far as captain ownership goes, how much do you like getting him in the captain spot? Because right now, Hurts is pulling the highest captain spot. Wow, dude, 21% at captain. Tom Brady, 20% at captain. This is where we have projected ownership at. What's their captain? What's their optimal captain probability? Hurts is actually 22.9%. That's above his projected ownership right now. And Brady's at 19.3.
I just checked our leverage tool as well, which is a fantastic tool for showdowns. Hurts is coming in with a negative leverage score, whereas Tom Brady's coming in slightly positive. So that's one indicator as well that maybe, I know you talked about captain specifically, but maybe overall ownership is a little high on Hurts when we just have other options on the slate that have ceilings, Tom Brady being one of them. And we know kind of historically last couple of years, this has changed a little bit with how well Tom Brady's played, but at times people don't want to click on him because he's perceived to be the old quarterback on the back 9 of his career, which is true to some extent. He can't play forever, but he's still playing at an elite level. The injury clouds this to some degree, but seeing the ownership where it is, where Brady's a little bit higher overall, but less owned in the captain spot, I think that's partially because salary is really tight tonight, specifically on DraftKings. But there's ways to approach that where you can stack Brady in so many different ways. And if you can gain even a little bit of leverage, that might be the route to take in some of these tournaments, especially some of the smaller fields.
Tom Brady's number one in fantasy points this year. I mean, is it, of course it is position, but is it not crazy to you that he could be, if he was, if he was Josh Allen's dad, he would have had him at 21, would have had Jalen Hurts at 21. That would, I'm just pointing out here that like all of these guys in the top 10 at his position outside of like Matthew Stafford and a couple of others, they're in their early 20s. Tom Brady's 44 years old, Matt. And you're right about like back nine of his career, or so you'd think, but he's shown no signs of slowing down. It honestly makes you think that he has sold his soul to the devil, or some witchcraft has taken place. You know what I mean? Or he is somehow immortal. I don't understand it, but there's nothing at all about Tom Brady to suggest that he has slowed down yet. And that to me is amazing.
I agree. It's crazy. And coming to Tampa Bay has sort of been a revitalization to his career. I think that a lot of it has to do with moving from, like the corpse of Julian Edelman over to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and the receiving core that Tampa Bay has. But at the same time, just like strictly for DFS speaking, between Jalen Hurts and Brady, I think it depends heavily on the contest you're playing. If it's cash style games, anything like that, I do favor Hurts in the captain spot. He has a better projection for us right now. Again, monitor this throughout the day. And he also just has less paths to failure. Brady isn't mobile, so there's that. Brady has the injury. There's that as well. But ultimately, I think you want to play them both in low-risk contests. For tournaments, especially smaller field ones, I like that Brady's coming in with lower ownership than Hurts. But there's ways to get unique with both. And Hurts, just the floor he provides, if we're strictly talking about the Eagles still, it's one of the best in football.
Devonta Smith may not have all of the fantasy totals to back it up, but he's the wide receiver 33 through 5 weeks. Okay. But at the same time, Matt, 456 air yards, 45% of team air yards. That's fifth in the NFL if you're looking at among all players. And he's had 2 touchdowns called back on offensive penalties already this season. His line could look his season line could look a lot different than it does. All I'm saying here is the man gets open. He is going to get open again, particularly against this Bucs team tonight. I mean, it feels like the big game. And I'm not saying this I'm not saying this without any evidence. Hopefully what I'm throwing out there now would make this a whole lot less arbitrary, but it feels like the Devonta Smith big game is coming just based on the target share he's seen recently, the amount of downfield opportunities, and the fact that once they get down to that 20, 25 yard line, Devonta Smith is looking to air it out to him. So I don't know. I'm sorry. Jalen Hurts is looking to air it out to him. I like Devonta Smith a lot in this matchup. I think he probably gets peppered again.
I like Devonta Smith too. I think it comes down to price a little bit and which quarterback you're playing. And if you can only play one, it's going to be tough to play all of these studs tonight.
Sure.
So if you're playing Hurts, I think you definitely want to prioritize Smith. He's really close in price to guys like Godwin and a little less close to Evans, but it's still comparable. And then he's more expensive than Antonio Brown. I think just because they're projected to score a little bit less, you'd prefer to get to Godwin over him for 600 more. But at the same time, the target share is just so consistent with Devonta Smith. Whereas in Tampa Bay, they all have fairly high target shares, but those big games rotate on a week-to-week basis. So a lot of how I'm going to approach this slate is which quarterback and which side of the game I'm prioritizing, trying to stack them up with some of those lead options. And then you're just naturally going to have to fill out value on the rest of your lineup. For example, if you captain like Jalen Hurts and play Devonta Smith, you're going to have to choose at max one of Godwin, Evans, Antonio Brown, maybe 2 if you're completely punting. So lineups are just really difficult. When I'm playing these receivers, I'm trying to correlate heavily with the quarterback.
For sure. And those are all very salient points, Matt. The ownership here in the captain spot between Godwin, Evans, Smith, and Brown, it's separated by right now, literally 1%. So completely flat. Same with total ownership, not 1%, but 38% Antonio Brown at the bottom of this grouping to 40.7% for Godwin. So, of course, these are projections. It's not like it's going to be exactly what it is, but we can feel pretty confident that it's all going to be pretty similar among those 4 players. And that's kind of the point here is Devonta Smith, we know, or at least we assume that he's going to see a pretty sizable target share for the Eagles. On the other side, better efficiency for guys like Godwin, Evans, and Antonio Brown, probably higher quality targets and all of that. But who knows which one of them is going to get the opportunity from week to week. Antonio Brown in the games he's played has a 17% target share. Godwin's at 18%. Mike Evans is at 20%. But Tom Brady also throws the ball a lot. So really, I look at it like this. If you're playing one entry, I might be leaning more towards Devonta Smith and a pass catcher for Tampa, or really maybe just not play Smith at all and go Brady and try and get both of his pass catchers in there and then go cheaper to the Philadelphia pass catchers. But if you're maxing, if you're playing 150 or even like 30 lineups, you have a lot more flexibility with what you can do trying to just spray and get to all of these receivers for Tampa.
For sure. And I think Devonta Smith is someone you can play in the captain spot too. I like this a little more on the Tampa Bay side where you can play a receiver there just because Brady's not going to be mobile. He doesn't have more paths to a ceiling. I still think it's viable with Devonta Smith and Hurts, but you're always worried about Hurts' legs. Like if Devonta Smith catches 2 touchdowns and sees most of the pass game volume, there's still a pretty decent chance that Hurts outscores him because Hurts is mobile and he's always going to contribute that extra little bit on the ground. Whereas if Brady funnels all of his targets or just even the touchdown production to one receiver, there's a very decent chance that that receiver outscores Brady. I think that's less likely on the Hurts side. So Devonta Smith, I think, is a fine captain, but I would rather captain some of the Tampa Bay receivers, even though it's spread around a little bit more. I think there's just a higher likelihood that if the touchdown volume was funneled to one of them, they would outscore the quarterback.
So the biggest thing for me, right, looking at this game is I don't see Philly being able to stop Tampa, similar to what we saw in Kansas City, where I don't think there was a single punt in the game. But I also don't see them being able to run on them either. And we've seen essentially every team just not abandon the run, Matt, mid-game, but not even attempt to run against Tampa. It's really a sight to behold. Philly already, according to our game script adjusted rush percentage tool, check that out, by the way, essentially how often are they running the ball? What percent are they running the ball or frequency or regardless of game script? Philly is 5th lowest in the league at 35%. So the one thing that keeps me coming back to Devonta Smith is, could this be a 50 passing attempt game from Jalen Hurts? And that's what it is. It's just this matchup in general, but it's not just Devonta Smith. I mean, Dallas Goedert, I think you and I agreed before the show, we're just going to consider him doubtful because he was placed on the COVID-19 list on Tuesday. He's vaccinated. He has to return 2 negative tests, but that's 2-day turnover is really difficult to do. You have Zach Ertz, and then you have guys like Quez Watkins. I can't wait to hear your breakdown on some of these guys because it's a weird offense. Like Quez Watkins has been targeted 4 times down, 20-plus yards downfield. He has 3 receptions on that for 185 yards. He's been locked in on deep targets with Jalen Hurts. So there are a lot of ways to look at this. And meanwhile, Jalen Reagor has been on the field a lot, but played less snaps than Quez Watkins last week and hasn't really been getting a lot of looks.
This breakdown is going to be really interesting tonight, specifically if Goddard misses the game, because you have a team that uses a lot of 2 tight end sets, and Ertz is a guy they'll use out of the slot a lot. If you just look at his comparison in line versus when he's playing true receiver sets, he's actually lining up in the slot or out wide more than he's playing in line. They'll use Goddard a lot as an inline tight end. So how do they morph their player personnel to this? And you mentioned Watkins playing more than Reagor. I think naturally they just might be forced onto the field more if Goddard misses because of the lack of personnel they have. Like, do they turn Jack Stoll into a full-time player? I would find that very hard to believe. Jack Stoll is basically just a pure blocker. He came out of Nebraska as a prospect, doesn't offer a lot of receiving upside. So how do they change their player personnel? I think you might be walking into more Watkins and more Reagor snaps if Goddard misses just out of necessity.
What if the offensive line can't contain this pass rush? Will we see more Jack Stoll possibly just to be in as a blocker?
We have seen them do this in the past. Like who was the tight? Richard Rodgers, I believe.
Richard Rodgers for the past couple of years. Yep.
Yeah, so I think Stoll is basically functioning in the Richard Rodgers role. And I mean, even going back a couple of years, Richard Rodgers always played a decent amount of snaps, but he was in there for a very specific reason. I think Jack Stoll's just not quite the same player that Rodgers is. So last week he played like 8% of the snaps, but it's a very clear defined role. But you make a good point. If the pass rush, which it should be a problem, Tampa Bay has a phenomenal pass rush. Maybe they do need to mitigate some of that pressure with a tight end blocking. And they can always flex Ertz out into the slot and use him as a big slot receiver. So I do think Stoll plays a little bit more. I just don't think he's as talented as a guy like Richard Rodgers. So this overall snap share, I think, is still a little questionable.
Agreed. Hurts has thrown 4 balls inside the 5-yard line at the goal line this year. 3 of them have gone to his tight ends. He's attempted 9 passes inside the 10. 5 of them have gone to his tight ends. And then 11 of 25 have gone to tight ends just in the red zone in general. So does Jack Stoll catch 1 for 5 and a touchdown, Matt? Anything's possible. Who knows? But I agree with you. It's a sketchy spot, but I'm not writing it off entirely though, just because, and you mentioned this right at the top of the show. If Jack Stoll were to have like 5 fantasy points, okay, and I'm not saying it's likely, I'm just throwing it out there, because if he would have like 5 fantasy points without Goddard on the field, that could win it for you. I mean, a guy won a solo millie the other day with, what was it, like 6 from Devonta Freeman in a game that saw a ton of points. So maybe you jam 5 studs in and Jack Stoll actually opens things up. That's the only reason to play him, not because you think he's good or going to be heavily involved, but he falls into a couple of points that are enough to get you really good players on both sides of the field.
Yeah, we've seen that succeed in a number of ways this year. It's not always with just like the pure punt play, but sometimes it's the backup tight end with like Donald Parham, or just, players that aren't expected to see a full-time role. Stoll is for sure like more in the realm of a pure punt play, but it can definitely happen. And he has a path to more snaps, which is kind of the ceiling for him here. If he does play more snaps, what does his role ultimately end up looking like? I still am just a little worried overall, but I mean, near the minimum price in tournaments, completely fine with it, not just because of maybe we don't expect him for a ton of production, but you mentioned it. What he allows you to do with the rest of your lineup is just as key.
No doubt. And I'll throw this out there. The Philadelphia Eagles 2 years ago ran 12 personnel or 2 tight end sets at like 57%. This last year was like 36%. This year's at 22%. So kind of in the middle of the league. They're not running nearly as many as they used to. So yes, Dallas Goedert being out is certainly a big deal, but 2 years ago, we would have been having an entirely different conversation. The biggest thing though is Zach Ertz, because Zach Ertz is second in team targets over the last 2 weeks. And while he may not be playing as many snaps as Goddard, he's running just as many routes. You have to think that this is a pretty decent spot for Zach Ertz today.
Yeah, there's just a lot of vacated targets from Goddard, and you mentioned it. Ertz has been more targeted on the year, but that role should be assumed completely by Ertz. Again, we don't think Stoll is the kind of player that can 1-for-1 fill that. And it's not like they're going to have Reagor or Quez Watkins doing the same thing that Ertz does. They just play different roles in the offense. I do think Reagor and Watkins play more, but again, you just can't replicate what Ertz will see. And at his particular price point, there's just not a lot of players down in that range that have guaranteed production. Ertz is basically the cheapest guy, I think, that has a clear target share from either team.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. What do you want to do with Quez and with Reagor and anybody else here in the passing attack?
Quez is also pretty cheap. Like I'm completely fine playing him. Some of the optimals I ran this morning played both Quez and Ertz. I think that's fine, just given the top heavy nature of the slate. You have Brady, you have Hurts, you have the elite receivers. In order to play them, you have to take some punts, and we don't have a clear option that's like the min price. So getting guys like Quez and Ertz, I do think makes sense. Quez specifically being cheaper than Reagor, I know it's a slight price difference, but Quez's involvement in the last 2 games, and you spoke to this a little bit earlier, he has been playing more snaps and running slightly more routes than Reagor. He's just been more efficient. So if you can get him at a cheaper price, which you can today, I do think going to him over Reagor makes some sense.
Okay, last thing here. How many pass catchers are you willing to pair with Jalen Hurts on a night like tonight?
I think you can pair 2 easy, maybe 3 given price. Again, if you're playing like, say your lineup was Brady, Evans, it's going to be real, unless you just full stack it, unless you go like a 5-1 Tampa Bay stack. If you're running anything with like a 3-3 build, a 4-2 build, you can't really play Hurts and Devontae Smith because you already allocated so much salary to Brady, Evans, Godwin, whoever it may have been. So I think just out of necessity, because of price, you walk into some Hurts stacks a little bit easier because Ertz is so cheap, because Quez Watkins is so cheap.
I'll throw this out there too. If anyone had questions about Greg Ward, both of his receptions on the season are touchdowns this year. And both of them were in pure garbage time late in the fourth quarter and blowout losses. So that means nothing. Unless you assume that this will go the same way as Kansas City or Dallas, then of course, load up on your Greg Ward and hope for that one target for a touchdown. All right, Matt, I want to get to Tampa Bay and I want to tell you guys about Jock Market, but the backfield here. I mean, last week it was miserable for Miami against Tampa Bay in terms of overall matchup. Myles Gaskin basically didn't. Brian Flores just said, hey, you're not playing at all 2 weeks ago. And then last week, the dude's all over the place as a pass catcher, racked up 2 scores. It feels like that's the only way to get it done today if you're Miles Sanders or Kenneth Gainwell. I'm not saying it's impossible, okay? But I am saying it's concerning. Now, Miles Sanders is still outsnapping Gainwell by a lot. Ran 27 routes to Gainwell's 8 last week. But Gainwell has seen an opportunity on 39% of snaps this year. So that's not bad. Sanders, 31% of snaps. So less snaps, still more opportunities when he's out there for Gainwell. But he's not getting any rushing attempts, which I don't know how much that matters. Like, how do you get it done today if you're one of these guys, if it's not through the air is pretty much the problem.
I think you'd have to see Philly get down on the 1 yard line and punch in a score. I don't see a lot of paths to efficiency. There's always the chance that one of them just breaks off like an anomaly long run or something like that. But outside of the pure receptions or like literally Philly getting down on the 1 and then punching in a goal line score, I don't think there's as many paths to victory for a Philadelphia running back, especially when you talk about captaining them. Again, they're going to come in with minuscule ownership in the captain spot. But I think that's for a good reason, given everything we've seen from Tampa Bay. So I'm just a little bit cautious with these backs. I mean, you can always look at price. Gainwell is much, much cheaper. But again, he's near in price to Ertz. Ertz has a far more consistent role, a far better matchup. If I'm just playing would I rather play Ertz or Gainwell in low risk contests? In tournaments, do whatever you want in this situation. But in low risk contests, Ertz is the better play.
I'm with you. Not to mention that even if you get down to the goal line, Jalen Hurts leads the team in rushing touchdowns. So that's a concern too.
For sure.
Yeah.
We saw 2 last week.
Sorry, what's that?
We saw 2 last week.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
for me, if go ahead.
Just from like a theoretical perspective at the goal line, you would rather play 11 on 11 with Hurts rushing in a touchdown than try to go 10 on 11 with like a Sanders and have your quarterback just be a non-factor in that part of the game. It's why like Josh Allen's so successful. These teams that run their quarterbacks at the goal line, you just have an extra player involved in the play.
No doubt. Here's the last thing I'll say on this though. I do think though that Kenneth Gainwell's price is cheap enough to where if you wanted to pair him with Jalen Hurts, it's not the craziest idea in that if he sees 5 or 6 targets, he's dynamic. If he can rip one off, he's 2,400 in the flex spot. It's not, we've seen it happen before. So you have to get different. There's no question about that.
For
that
sure.
might be one way to differentiate is
He
going
pops
Kenny
a lot too, man.
Sorry?
He pops a lot. He's in 4 of the top 5 optimals just from our projections.
Wow. He's cheap. Yeah. I mean, look, when you're that cheap and you're getting touches, albeit limited touches, and you're still the backup, it makes sense to me to have some interest there. All right. Talking about the Bucs on the other side of this one, coming into the link, touchdown favorites. We'll get to that, but I did want to tell you about Jock Market. If you haven't heard about it yet, essentially they're turning fantasy sports into a stock exchange where you can make money every hour, minute, down to the second, baby. In all seriousness, though, you sell shares or buy shares of individual players in real time for real money. And if you use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, get up to a $50 deposit bonus on your first deposit. So here's the best thing, though. Outside of the fact that you can use a pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players, which is where I think you're really going to be making the money, is being able to judge what the value of those players is leading up to lock and mid lock and being able to get in on them earlier in the day. Right. But if you are, it's called a first market guarantee. If you're a new user at Jock Market and you don't profit on your first NFL cash market, then you'll be refunded up to $100. That's a win-win right there. I mean, literally no risk coming into it. Either you cash or you don't, and you get refunded up to $100. If you download it in the App Store or the Google Play Store, you can check it out for yourself. They got markets for football, baseball, basketball, hockey, and PGA. And you use the promo code again, Awesemo, AWSEMO, $50 deposit or bonus on your first deposit. So you can, and last thing here, this is always big. I talk about this with anything. There are free Jock Market IPO projections to help you beat the market. We have them at awesemo.com. Use them in conjunction with playing over there and using that promo to get your free $50. Of course, if you don't cash in your first NFL cash market, refunded up to $100. That's nice icing on the cake. Check it out, Jock Market in the App Store or in the Google Play Store, JOCK space MKT. All right, Matt, Tom Brady, 44 years old. This man does not die. He does not age. He just can. Everyone thought that he was going to be super sick and play like shit. They were shorting the Bucs coming into the last week's game because they're like, do you hear Tom Brady's voice? Boy, he looks gone. And then he throws for 5 touchdowns and is in the Millie Maker winning lineup and pretty much every other lineup out there for week 5.
Yeah, the narratives with Brady, I mean, we've been down this path so many times. Age, illness, whatever it is, injuries, he just overcomes.
No Belichick.
Everything. Brady, he's just been a monster. At this point, I know he's injured coming into this week, but it's hard to project him for anything but full health, especially with the practice report. He has a clear ceiling, a ceiling that rivals, and it has been better than Jalen Hurts' ceiling throughout the year. But like you mentioned, he's the number 1 scorer in all of fantasy sports DFS. However, if you're just playing low-risk contests and trying to decide between the two in the captain spot, again, I think Hurts has less paths to failure because he's mobile. But with Brady, he doesn't really have a ton of paths to failure anyway. Even if you think like Tampa Bay gets way up in this game, they have such a high pass rate that Brady typically, unless Fournette punches in like 4 touchdowns, Brady is the path that gets them to their ceiling performances. So he's definitely not a player you want to ignore. And based on some of the tools we have at Awesemo, the leverage scores, it's actually Hurts that has the negative leverage tool right now for tournaments, and Brady is coming in slightly more positive. So if this holds throughout the day, Brady is going to be the player I'm going to try to prioritize between the two, maybe run some 5-1 stacks, some 4-2 stacks, stuff like that.
How viable do you think it is to say no Brady? And I'm just thinking, like, let's say you go with a Hurts or Devontae Smith stack, right? Trying to cover our bases here, Matt. You've got Ertz in there, pretty inexpensive. Maybe you went Gainwell, whatever. Quez Watkins. And you also have, say, an AB or a Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, whatever. Evans would be tough to fit in those. How viable is it to go like Godwin and Leonard Fournette instead of Brady and just hope that their run game is dominant today and Brady doesn't need to do as much, even though that's not what we've seen for most of the season, really any of the season?
I think you can definitely do that. Brady's still coming in with a ton of ownership. And there's so many options at the top of pricing that are elite plays. Tampa Bay is concentrated between their 3 receivers, and any one of them could have a massive game. If they do, Brady's not mobile. So it's very possible that, like, if Mike Evans scores a touchdown and sees 10 targets and the rest of their production comes on the ground, it's Evans you'd want instead of Brady. And because of the other expensive options on the slate, I think that is viable. Like I just did that build quickly for reference, like with a Jalen Hurts captain paired with Devontae Smith, Mike Evans, Leonard Fournette, and even running Ertz, you're basically punting off your last spot. So there's really tough decisions you have to make. I'm more than comfortable with that build. And Leonard Fournette is an excellent leverage piece just based on like potential touchdown scoring.
How much do you like these receivers talking about in order? We know we like a lot of these guys. I mentioned earlier too, Matt, that the target shares are going to be spread out. I don't really care about that when it comes to Tampa Bay. I think you and I have hammered this home so many times over the past couple of years that lower target shares and higher passing volume offenses, particularly efficient ones and explosive ones with high quality opportunities like Tampa Bay, it bothers us not at all. Tom Brady's averaging 45 passing attempts per game this year. That's insanity. So if that's the case, I don't care if Antonio Brown has an 18% or Godwin 18% or Mike Evans at 20%. 18, 17, 20% in this offense is far more valuable than 25% in the New York Jets offense.
For sure. And on top of that, you just have the likelihood for such a high ceiling game. Now it's hard to predict, which I think at times makes people shy away from this offense because they don't know if it's going to be Godwin, Evans, or Antonio Brown. And they all individually have high target shares in the offense, not as high as like Devontae Adams, but still high. But it comes in volatile spots. One week it's Antonio Brown with 12 targets. The next it's Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin has a low score, and it rotates on a week-to-week basis. So it's hard to predict. For tournaments, I think that's excellent, especially if people aren't going to be captaining these guys with as much frequency as they should, which looks like that could happen tonight just between Godwin, Evans, Antonio Brown. None are even drawing 10% ownership, not even 9% ownership in the captain spot tonight. And if you can directly leverage that off a high-owned Brady, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So do I.
For tournaments specifically, tournaments we're talking about.
So do I. Like, okay, I'm going to try something here. If you were to captain Brady and then you wanted to play Godwin and Brown, it's pretty ugly there.
Like if you play Hurts, you essentially can't play the rest of the lineup.
With the guys that I just mentioned?
If you do Brady, captain, Godwin, and Antonio Brown, you essentially cannot play another stud unless you're going to punt off twice.
No, you still can't, because if you have Brady, Godwin. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. So Brady, Godwin, Antonio Brown, and then if you go Jalen Hurts and just say you throw Jack Stahl in there, you have enough for, well, you do have enough for OJ Howard.
Yeah, actually, I don't mind OJ Howard. We'll talk about him in a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah. But you're pretty much playing Jalen Hurts with his only pass catcher and probably won't catch any passes being Jack Stahl. So that's what bothers me, because while I think Jalen Hurts can rack up rushing yards today, he's going to have to throw. There's just no two ways around that. So I'm a little nervous about that. That's why I keep coming back to guys like OJ Howard. We don't really need to speak a ton to Evans and Godwin and Antonio Brown, unless you think one of these guys just has a clear inferior or superior matchup that we should be talking about.
I don't think it matters a ton with how much they're going to rotate these guys around the formation.
Agreed. And I mean, look, Darius Slay's good, but we've seen dominant receivers just beat the pulp out of him anyway in spots because, granted, to be fair, it's a little bit different now that Jonathan Gannon is in there and they're not just leaving Slay on an island against DK Metcalf, you know, but I mean, and then wondering what happened. We saw Jalen Ramsey trying. DK Metcalf is such a monster that I don't care who you are. It's just really tough. So, you know, you get where I'm going with this. Slay took a lot of heat. Slay took a lot of heat for that. It's like, you got this guy one-on-one and man, every single snap, and you wonder why he can't handle this guy on, you know, whatever.
Things happen, man. Like we saw Hunter Renfrow body Jalen Ramsey. Like Hunter Renfrow.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, and what about last week where everybody wanted to avoid Mike Evans because they thought he would get the exclusive Xavier Howard treatment, and he ended up being in every optimal. Shit, he was 5% in a lot of large field tournaments. That's
unbelievable.
Crazy, right? 5%. And he wasn't even expensive. So you get where I'm going with this, guy.
For sure.
What do you make of OJ Howard, though? He played more snaps than Brate last week, but Brate still ran more routes. But OJ Howard was on the field more, at least.
Yeah, Brate's just like an undersized move tight end. So when he's out there, they're not going to use him to block. He's just not going to play in line. OJ Howard is a good receiver. We saw that like early in his career in college, but he's also a good blocker. And he's the player that's going to be the preferred option in that phase of the game, which is naturally just going to lead to more snaps than Brate. Ultimately, I view them similarly, though. Like their routes, the difference between them wasn't like a drastic difference. So at their prices today, I think you can comfortably play them both, especially considering they're both super cheap. And even looking at Gronk, like Gronk has never been like a 90% of the snaps player in Tampa Bay. They like to rotate these tight ends for specific roles. With Brate's receiving role, comfortable getting to it. OJ Howard, again, more snaps on the field. And you and I have talked about this a lot. So many offenses come into these games now with multiple plays called or run pass options that it might be a run play, but OJ Howard's on the field and they check into a pass. So he's naturally going to walk into some volume as well.
Absolutely.
And they're so cheap, both of them.
I know. That's what I like about it. I mean, the way I look at this Tampa Bay team is if you're projecting touchdowns with Gronk out, yeah, obviously Evans and Antonio Brown and Godwin, right? Like even Leonard Fournette, who's been targeted 5 times in the red zone himself, by the way. Those guys are certainly going to be the ones that you're projecting for the highest target share in scoring opportunities, or just the highest touchdown share. But it's not like Tom Brady is a stranger to or unfamiliar with targeting tight ends in the red zone. And not even just Gronkowski. We've seen Cameron Brate get a lot of opportunities down there inside the 10-yard line. I'm not saying he's going to have 5 for 50 and a score, but if you go for, 3 for 25 and a touchdown, that's going to get you where you need to go on a slate like this, you would think. For
sure. And especially if it's OJ Howard, who is cheaper than Brate.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And by a decent margin too. If it's OJ Howard that puts up that score, I think you're going to need him.
OJ Howard has just been a perennial disappointment. I think we can agree with that, but
no qualms with that.
But he's still somebody that you have to consider today, whether you like him or not. It's that simple. I mean, if we're talking about Jack Stahl, you're clearly have to be talking about OJ Howard. And go ahead.
Sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say Andy Kay said that it's the Illuminati, which is why Tom Brady has been able to stay so spry all of these years. Maybe he's right, Matt. Maybe he's out there at Bohemian Grove. Jordan, you've been to Bohemian Grove?
TB12.
Yeah, that's burning effigies to Moloch the owl god.
I don't know. Tom Brady's said some weird things in the past. I don't know, man.
Yeah, there was a South Park episode where it was like he was getting. Did you ever see the South Park episode where they were everyone was trying to steal his shit because that's what was keeping him young? Oh, it was so.
When
good.
did that come out?
A few years ago.
Okay, I was gonna say I probably am like 5 years removed from watching every South Park, so I might have just missed it.
I still watch South Park, man. I still love it.
When I was a kid, I think I've seen every single episode until maybe like 5 years ago.
It's one of the greatest shows ever.
I love it.
It's still good. It's not the same. But it's still good. Ryan says Laffy's going to be so mad when Ronald Jones gets a garbage time. You're damn right, man. Ronald Jones will get that garbage time touchdown the one time I don't play him in a showdown slate. Matt, that's a perfect segue. So thanks, Ryan. I'm sure that was intentional. Is there any, so you've got Fournette, who has 67% of the carries in the backfield this year, 67% of red zone carries as well, 5 targets in the red zone. He's obviously getting heavily involved. He's the clear lead back. What do you do with him? And then what do you do with Ronald Jones and Giovanni Bernard? We got to cover all our bases here for sure.
Bernard plays a very specific role. He's actually carried a few more times than I thought he would, but he's certainly the preferred, like, I don't want to say just pure pass catching back because Fournette has actually been a little more involved than I thought he'd be. But let's say like hurry up, third down, places where they need tempo pass catching, Giovanni Bernard is going to be the guy. And he has been very involved still. Ronald Jones has kind of become an afterthought. With that said, he is still seeing some opportunity on the ground. Like last week, he has 5 carries, and actually 2 of those did come in the red zone. So Ronald Jones just can't be forgotten entirely. Yeah. But ultimately, it comes down to price for some of these guys. Like, would you rather go way down in price? I mean, for Tampa Bay specifically, and play like an OJ Howard, or would you rather go up a little bit and take Ronald Jones? Or, I mean, Giovanni Bernard is kind of, he's above Brate. So Giovanni Bernard's like a little expensive for me outside of pure tournaments. But the interesting question is, do you think OJ Howard has more secure opportunity or a guy like Ronald Jones? And I personally side with Howard.
Yeah, it's probably Howard. God, they're so close in price. Ronald Jones has seen 1 target over the last 3 weeks, 4 on the season. That's the biggest thing for me, because if you're banking on 5 carries from Ronald Jones, which is likely what you're going to get, 4 to 6 carries from Ronald Jones, Matt, you're going to need a touchdown or you're going to need him to rip off a huge run. But even when he did score against New England, he still finished with only 8.5 fantasy points. I'm not saying that can't get it done at his price, but the ceiling on Ronald Jones seems very, very low right now.
I agree 100%. And it's not like it's high on OJ Howard either. We're splitting hairs. Right. I just checked our projections. They're within 1 point. They don't even have 1 point separating them. OJ Howard's slightly on top. So I think if you're like splitting hairs for cash games, OJ Howard's the guy you'd go to. I'm not necessarily sure you want to play him to begin with, or we're just talking about this particular dichotomy. But Ronald Jones for tournaments, I think still should be somebody you consider, especially if they get up by a couple scores too. You want to build a lot of tournament lineups. I mean, tell yourself some stories. What if Tampa Bay is winning this game by 14 points? What if they're winning by like 21 points? Does Ronald Jones potentially see more work? I think the answer would be yes. So there's some lineups where I will be building with Ronald Jones in there just because of alternate game scripts or which is not what Vegas is projecting.
We are close to 100 likes. Appreciate you guys. I know it's early in the morning on a Thursday. Well, not super early, definitely on the West Coast. Jordan Klein is struggling to stay awake over there. Jordan, do you do coffee? Yeah, do you do coffee? Yeah. What else? Okay. Jordan Klein producing today's show. Shout the man out. Got a long day ahead of him today. Thursdays are rough for Jordan and for me, but we love doing this stuff. Subscribe, hit that thumbs up for us. Much appreciated. And if you want to get access to everything we have at Awesemo, everything, football, baseball, hockey, PGA, MMA, NASCAR, esports, all of that stuff. If they have contests out there, we have content for it. Ownership, player projections, top stack tool, boom bust tool, the lineup builder, the premium Slack chat, all of that, all of the advanced data, all of the advanced stats, you name it. We just keep adding stuff. All of these tools built by the #1 ranked player out there, Awesemo himself. This fella's won a lot of money, millions of dollars, as a matter of fact, using these tools. Of course, you have to know how to implement them. There's no doubt about that. But we've got just an insane amount of tutorials and ways to help you understand these tools. If you want to check it out and you want to try it for a week, Awesemo plus Platinum, everything on the site, use the promo code NFL Showdown, all one word, all caps, NFL Showdown when you go to awesemo.com/join. Jordan, I'm assuming you can throw something into chat as well. Check that out. And if you want to just go straight hockey, say you like hockey, right? Or you want to try it out and you think there might be an edge and you want to check out the tools, we have all of the same tools I just mentioned for all of the other sports, but for hockey, use the promo code CROSSCHECK, all caps, one word, at checkout, or it should be awesemo.com/promos, really. CrossCheck gets you the full Awesemo plus Platinum NHL package for $3. So CrossCheck for that, 25% off everything on the site for the week using NFL Showdown. Pick one. I think you'll enjoy it. And when you do, go to the Awesemo Slack chat and jump in the premium office hours where you've got the pros from Awesemo answering your questions and helping you become a better player. And if you have any questions, hit me up on DM. They are open over on Twitter. All right, Matt, ready to build a lineup, man?
Yeah, let's do it.
Large field tournament. Maybe we got to go a little crazy here, but let's give it a whirl. Captain. Who do we want to captain?
I think we got to do one of the pass catchers. Which one? That's the tough part. Let's how about we do like a Godwin, because he's coming off like the worst game out of the three.
I like that. Yeah, Godwin is yet to have that. He had a big game in week 1, but he's yet to have that real monster game that you can have in Tampa Bay. I like it. Okay, let's go Godwin. It means I pretty much have to go Brady here. So I'm plugging Brady in.
I like Brady.
It's about to get ugly real quick, though.
I think the tough question you got to ask yourself is, does Hurts rush enough where we need him? Or can we play like a pass catcher by himself?
I think playing a pass catcher by themselves is not the craziest idea.
So then we want to probably like go with Devontae Smith then.
Let's try.
Unless you think like Rager or Quez has a defined role. I think they have defined roles, but I don't think they come with the same ceiling.
I honestly like Quez today because I think, again, the one guy that Jalen Hurts has been very accurate with and been able to connect with on deep balls has been Quez Watkins. There's no question there. But let's just see what we can do if we have Devontae Smith in here. And then I'm going to punt. I'm going to go to OJ Howard. So that gives us Godwin with and Howard with Brady, and then Devontae Smith, 66.50 per player remaining for the last two.
That's not bad. I think we should consider kickers and defenses too in this range. Like the conversation I'm having with myself right now is, would we also want Ertz in this lineup without Hurts? Can like Ertz and Devontae Smith pay off this without Hurts?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Or Gainwell, just because while we're playing him for the pass catching upside, maybe he breaks off a run. I don't know. Or a touchdown at the goal line.
For sure. These guys are cheap enough to consider down there. And I honestly think it comes down to that, or would you want to play like suck up and just tally every single, or a little attachment to every single score Tampa Bay has? I'm fine either way.
Okay. Yeah, right. Like if suck up has a 45-yarder and then 5 extra points.
Yes. And
not crazy.
Not crazy.
Let's try it cheaper. Let's try someone cheaper. One of these skill players, Matt.
All right. Let's use Gainwell then.
All right, cool. I don't mind this for large field. This is not going to be a particularly popular build, I don't think.
No, and I think what we're going to end up with is like a premier Tampa Bay stack. And then you're just hoping that like Philly in catch-up mode, Gainwell and Devontae Smith get some cheap receptions. Maybe Devontae Smith breaks off a long touchdown or something.
So this gives us Mike Evans as well, if we want him.
And if we want to leave more salary on the table, we have that option with Antonio Brown.
Absolutely. Yeah, Antonio Brown leaves 2,700 on the table. I can't imagine on a slate where guys are as expensive as they are today that many people are going to be leaving almost 3,000 on the table. And this lineup doesn't even look that bad.
And we faded Hurts. So we faded a heavily owned player. So I don't necessarily think you need to leave as much salary on the table. Like even Evans with 700 left, I'm not sure how many times this lineup would be duped without Hurts.
I'm with you. Yeah, and if you wanted, you go full on onslaught, pull Gainwell out and go with the Bucks or go with Ryan Suckup. You can make that work, and you'd have only Devontae Smith. There's a lot of different ways. So this build to me actually is pretty nice.
I like it too, especially for large field.
For sure. All right, cool. Yeah, and obviously we're trying to be far different than anyone else because there's going to be a lot of dupes. There always are, not as much as basketball, but all right, cool. Hey, Matt. What do you say? Oh, we have free content on the site today. I meant to mention that for you guys. The NFL Showdown top plays tool is free. It's an awesome tool, Matt. I honestly feel like anyone should be using this tool for Showdown sites.
I agree. I use all our tools for Showdown.
Yeah.
Projections, ownership projections, our leverage scores. I'm on the top Showdown single plays tool right now. I was using it all show.
I know. It's great. It gives you the probability that a player will be 2 through 6 or top 2 through 5 for FanDuel or DraftKings. Gives you the probability that they'll be the top scorer, their leverage score, all of that stuff. The top over all. It's really valuable stuff when you're trying to figure out how to be different and what players might be getting steamed a little too much going into weeks like this, or might not be getting enough ownership based on the likelihood that they'll be in the optimal or they'll be a top option or 2 through 6. So that's totally free today. Under NFL drop down daily fantasy. And then you can go to, it's under top stacks or it's under Showdown and single game data. Either one of them, you can find it. Check that out. And also MLB ownership projections are free today as well. So have some fun with that. Hey, Matt, favorite prop of the day or bet. What do you got for me?
So I like Quez Watkins over 2.5 receptions. The problem is you just got to lay such heavy juice right now. So I think if you could find this at a 3 or maybe even a 3.5 and get better overall odds, I'm willing to take it. I love the 2.5. It's just been hit pretty hard already, it looks like, but that's my favorite one.
I'm with you. So I went over to Odd Shopper where you can do the shop NFL. It's incredible. And then you can sort by expected ROI and expected win rate if you pick your state and then go to props. And I found some I really like here, but the one that stood out to me the most, I really wanted to go Jalen Reagor under 3.5 receptions, but I'm going Kenneth Gainwell under 14.5 rushing yards. Matt, I've been burned on backup running back under props lately, like Roundtree when Eckler got banged up and then just milked away the clock late in the game. Sony Michel, I had under 22.5 yards. Seriously, I could go over Samaje Perine. I almost lost because Mixon went down in the last drive. So this probably will not bode well for me. However, Kenny Gainwell has only seen 6 total carries over the last 3 games. 6. That's not good. And I don't see them running the ball a lot at all today. I assume he's going to be used mostly as a pass catcher. Maybe he'll get some goal line work, which he has, but that's fine because a few yards doesn't bother me at all. So under 14.5 yards for Kenny Gainwell. The best spot to take that, according to OddsShopper, where all of our guys behind the scenes, just data scientists that have aggregated everything, would tell you that FanDuel betting the under gives you the best odds. And if you're wondering what this Shop NFL is, it's amazing because it takes every single book that's available to you and gives you the best bet on a certain book. It might not seem like a lot, Matt, minus 110 to minus 120, but when you're getting like 10 cents on the dollar like that, that stuff adds up a lot. And it makes it so you actually can be sustainable better. And it makes the losses over time a lot less and the wins over time a lot more. It really does add up.
It's more important than the lines themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, really check it out. I think you guys will love it. We have the expected ROI tool, expected win rate tool, where you can grab the best bet. It's a couple clicks and boom, you've got your best bets of the day. So I think you'll really like it. And it's totally free as well. All right. Matt, I guess that'll do it for us, huh?
I'm ready. I'm excited for the game.
Final prediction on the score.
Oh, man. Final prediction on the score. Let's go Tampa Bay 31, Philly 24.
Okay, so we're going over and we're pushing.
Yes.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go. Yeah, how does Tampa score less than 30 in this game, Matt?
Brady's hurt.
That's it, right?
Like, the only way.
That's it. I'm going to go 35. So 5 touchdowns for Tampa to 20. I'm going to go 35 to 28.
Ooh, way over.
Yeah. I think Eagles are going to score. I think they're going to score points.
I think so too.
We'll see. Maybe 35-24, but we'll go 35-28. And we'll also see you back here tonight for the deeper dive and live before lock. And for those of you guys that just love DFS and you're trying to chill all day, well, coming up, you've got the NFL Strategy Show Matchups Marathon Breakdown with Matt Savoca and myself at 11 Eastern. You got the MLB Strategy Show coming up right now, the NHL Strategy Show, and then deeper dive live before lock tonight. We'll see you back here soon. Follow Matt at Matt_Gajeski, myself at Lafayette_D. And on your way out, say hello to Jordan Klein. Thank him for his work here producing today's show. Here's the head shake. There it goes. All right, we'll see you back here soon. Peace. The traditional head shake.